Hey guys, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about a free resource on the Scrivener Solutions website. We all know that consistency builds trust, but somehow getting on that consistency train can be hard. Finding the time, thinking of what to say. Oh my goodness, believe me, I feel your pain. I get it. I know all too well the struggle. Sometimes we make things way too complicated for ourselves. You don't need a complicated plan to become consistent with your content marketing. Working that consistency muscle by using a super simple content plan will give you a big win, and you can build upon that. We have a free resource to help you. Go over to scrivenersolutions.com/checklist and download the super simple strategy to jumpstart consistent content creation checklist. Yes, it's a long name, but all you have to remember is scrivenersolutions.com/checklist, and you can get that instant download. Get started on the right foot and make the commitment to consistency. Other things will follow, but consistency really does matter. Start super simple and download the checklist at scrivenersolutions.com/checklist. All right, now onto the show. Hi, I'm Gayla Scrivener, ex-corporate girl and now work-from-anywhere adventure seeker. Creating a work-from-anywhere lifestyle isn't without its challenges, but those challenges certainly don't overshadow all the many benefits. What breaks my heart is seeing folks stuck and unhappy in a career and lifestyle when they want more out of life. I believe that we all have the opportunity to create the life of our dreams and earn a living in fun and creative ways to make our dream lifestyle a reality. You too can experience wonderful adventure and freedom as you live life on your own terms. In this weekly podcast, I share experiences when it comes to growing a lifestyle business through guest interviews, content marketing experience and perspectives, virtual leadership lessons, and I'll even throw in some travel adventures. My hope is through all the interviews, the tips, advice, and personal experience, you'll be inspired and motivated to keep going and creating your dream lifestyle. Life's an adventure. There's no time but the present to live life to the fullest. Hi there, and welcome to the show. I am so glad that you're here. This week, we're wrapping up the series about the Great Resignation discussion I had with my good friends and colleagues, Genesis Eakes and Linda Guild. Now, if you're tuning in for the first time or missed the last two episodes, you need to be sure to scroll back and listen, because a few weeks ago, Genesis, Linda, and I were just having this conversation about this craziness that's happening in the workforce right now. And we decided to hit record. And what came out of that was some great insight. And I decided to split it up into a 3-part series. And I'm sharing with you because I really believe that how our conversation and our discussion evolved, it was just had some super cool pieces of knowledge nuggets that you could use. So I want to tell you a little bit more about Genesis and Linda. They have both been previous guests on my show, and I have links in the show notes of those past episodes so that you can get to know them a little bit better. But you may be hearing more from them. I just love to hear their perspective. We work in little different pockets of how we serve others. And Genesis Eakes is the founder and president of Genesis Eakes International. And she consults mission-driven organizations, and she brings deep experience in leadership development, strategy, and high-performance team building. And she trains organizations in teamwork and building culture and strategy, and it's phenomenal. Linda is the founder of the Talented Alliance of Part-Time Professionals, or TAP. Now, TAP is a virtual organization that provides a forum and resources for both individuals seeking part-time positions or they're currently a part-time worker, And also for employers or companies who want to employ part-time staff and have that type of work flexibility within their organizations. They provide a ton of resources, and it is awesome. And particularly their job board is amazing. I encourage you to get onto both of their mailing lists and follow them on social, and their links are down there in the show notes. And I really like what they're sharing. But this conversation that we had a few weeks ago and that we decided to hit record on, it was a great discussion about the Great Resignation. All of us are affected by this phenomenon in one way or another. We're affected by it as a consumer, as an employer, or even if we own businesses, or, because we're all in the workforce, right? So we're all seeing the effects and the ripple. Employees have been just fed up with their current work environment and are demanding something different. These feelings may, with you, have been bubbling up for a long, long time. What is the secret sauce in finding the new normal? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But the truth is that when it comes to work environments, they are evolving. And we're all just trying to figure it out. Linda reiterated last week that communication is number one. And that's so, so true. And Genesis had explained what she means by companies just had overdrawn, just pulled at their teams, and that team relationship account has been overdrawn. And now teams are revolting. People have had enough. And now we're seeing some really creative ways in how we can serve others and how we work. And we can earn a living we dream about. We earn a living and create a lifestyle that had previously been put on the back burner. And businesses can't lead their teams as they always have, because we in the workforce, we're demanding more, right? Change is happening. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch to the recording as I start off sharing an example of a time when I negotiated a new work schedule and landed a part-time gig that I really wanted. So it's been a long time ago, but we are thinking of creative ways to earn a living and prosper. And we'll just start off with an example that I had. It's unfortunate that there's some leaders out there that does not seem to be very receptive to new ideas, but you never know until you try. And you could have a long-term employment without having to leave. And that is so much less stress on the manager or the leaders because they don't have to replace you. And there's something that would work with the employee. I remember, it had to have been 20 years ago or more, that I was a new mama. I went in and I landed a temp job as an office manager for a nursing home. But it was only supposed to be for 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. It was for another lady's maternity leave. I wasn't supposed to be there that long. That was the full-time gig. And then after that, I would find another temporary job or a part-time job. The lady never came back. So it's like, I wanted part-time because I have this new baby at home, but I wanted to get out of the house. So what happened was I negotiated. I went to the administrator and I said, your accounts receivable, terrible. And my husband was in the military, so I knew that we were not going to be there long term. So I did not want to accept a long-term full-time position. So you negotiate, right? It's like, I'm already here. I'm already trained. I can help you out, but hire somebody for full-time. In a year and a half, I am not going to be in North Carolina at all. You know that of me now. So I can help you get your accounts receivable in line. And I negotiated at a time a smaller hourly wage for part-time plus a percentage of accounts receivable collections. It really worked out to be some really great bonuses. And it also worked out for them because they thought that that was money that they'd never see again. So that's kind of an example. Instead of just quitting altogether, it's like, I don't want full-time because I definitely want part-time. I was willing to do full-time for this amount of time, instead of training somebody new, you're able to transition. And then I'm sure that there's timeshare type of scenarios that your current workforce could like share a particular position or shift roles. I'm sure that there's a lot of different ideas that when you're in the trenches doing it, you can brainstorm with your fellow teammates and your manager.
Absolutely. That's the beautiful thing, right? When we can get everybody at the table that should be there and actually showing up with who they are and being able to offer the strength of who they are and saying, hey, I can do this part really well. What else can happen here? And then we can negotiate, because that's what we're all trying to do, right? We are in this process. It's literally a once in a lifetime thing, I hope. And also once in a century, possibly, where we literally are walking through an unprecedented time where we literally get to invent a new normal. And I know industries talk about that, all kinds of stuff talk about that in different ways, but literally as a society, we are reinventing what is normal, what is possible, and what does this world of work look like moving ahead. It's literally kind of like our own version of the Industrial Revolution, how it literally transitioned people from this place to this place. That's what we're walking through. And I love the point that, Linda, I believe you were bringing it up saying, hey, it's okay to have communication and it's not just one person's responsibility. Reminds me, one of the things that I tell people all the time when they're like, well, is it okay if I say this? Is it the question to ask yourself is, who is the communication important to? Right? Who is it important to? That's the person who's responsible for bringing it up. So if I'm a leader, if I'm a manager, supervisor, and it's important to me to keep my staff, then guess what? It's my responsibility to initiate conversations and build that relationship capital, build those relationships that help us stay connected. If I am looking for some flexible work environment, if I'm looking for something that is different than what's currently being offered, guess what? That communication is more important to me than it is to anybody else in the company. So it's going to be my responsibility to bring that to the table, to bring that communication to the table. So just that little thing of thinking that through, who is this communication most important to? That's the person who's responsible for bringing it to the table. And not offloading it to someone else.
And I think with that, is it okay to say, if you're saying that, think through really how you're saying it. Practice your tone, practice how is it going to come across? Because, I used to say, I don't yell, but you have a tone, right? You might, but you're right. You've never raised your voice at me. Okay. That tone's not acceptable, right? So if I need something and want something, how do I also frame it in such a way that shows that I've thought through some of the other person's perspective or the company's perspective? So it's not just, I want to work at home so I can be there when my kids are home. Okay, so you're going to do your work when your kids are home? Is that what you're telling? That, because that's what I would hear instead of, hey, I found that if I'm not doing this commute, I'm really fresh in the morning and I can sit down and do this, but this is also how I'm going to stay connected with my teammates. And I think that one piece is the piece really how to stay connected remote and how to create that bank, right? Because I think there's an art to it. And the art has to include, it can't just be that the people that are the same level are connected and the manager is on a different planet, right? So what are some best practices? And especially as you get above, I'm a micro team. Gail is slightly bigger than me, but still considered micro, to a company that has 100 people with a third of them working across the country and other people in a building. What happens to those people across the country that you've never met? Who's responsible for reaching out to them? How do they stay connected to the company as a whole, not just the 3 people they work most closely with? I think it's a very fascinating piece. And
Well, and those questions are a lot of the questions that most corporate leaders are wrestling with right now, because they are looking ahead and going, okay, if we are creating some sort of flexible work environment where sometimes we're hybrid, sometimes we're fully remote, sometimes we're everything in between, how do we keep our company culture active? And that's really what you're looking at when you're talking about how do we stay connected? How do we do these things? How do we promote? How do we get recognized? How do we do all these things? That's really what you're talking about. Those are all those different nuances that feed into a company's culture. And one of the things that I am coaching companies to do is to not just try and slap something on the top of, because typically what happens, we have to create something new, basically, is what I'm saying, because it's similar to the movie industry. I'm a huge movie buff, and it's just been breaking my heart waiting for new movies to come out and be released because of the delay from 2020. But anyway, what happened was before the movie industry was birthed, everyone got their entertainment in that genre. If you're talking about performing arts, it was in a theater. And there were live actors on a stage and they were in person, and that was how you did it. Well, then there was this really cool technology thing, AKA Zoom for the corporate world, or Teams, or any kind of video conferencing, right? There's this really cool thing that was invented called the video camera that could track and record moving pictures, which just blew up this whole performing arts industry. That was just crazy. Well, when they tried to just film, if they just got a video camera in front of a stage and filmed, if you've ever just filmed like your kid's performance or nieces or nephews or something like that, it really kind of lacks something on the other side of that. You're like, yeah, not the same as being there. Yep. We could see what happened, but it really wasn't the same experience. And that's the same thing that's happening when people just try to slap their culture on top of flexible work environments, hybrid, completely, hey, we're just completely remote now, and we're just going to slap our same culture, the same way of doing things on top of that. And then what happens? You get the equivalent of your video recording of a play in front of you, versus what actually happened is this emergence of two different worlds, this whole new genre of cinematography that realized that camera angles needed to be different. That is it still acting? Yes, but acting for a camera and acting on a stage are two different things. They are not the equivalent. And so they literally had to start over and build something new from the ground up. And then there was all of these industries that came alongside to support it, and beautiful things that came from it. And we still have place. We can still go to things for areas that have in-person things opening up. And we now have this whole other industry. So I think that's the mindset that companies need to adopt as they are looking forward. If they are changing, if they are going to create a new environment, a new way of doing work, whether it's completely virtual, whether it's hybrid, whether it's just flexible, in and out, whatever that looks like, that's a drastic enough shift that they need to rethink all of those elements that go into culture. How do we do culture? And how are we going to make sure that us that we love as a community, as an organization, gets connected and it stays all the way through that organization? So it's not easy. It's not going to work if you just try to slap it on the top.
This has been a fantastic conversation. And I love what you said, Genesis. It's like you don't just layer on top. We're creating new cultures. We're innovating. From the whole conversation, the root of it is communication. And communication is not just speaking, it's also receiving, right? We have to receive the information and understand and learn other people's perspective. From the perspective, and just kind of some final words, from my perspective of being an entrepreneur, and the communication piece. And if you're wanting to transition from corporate life to being a solopreneur, a freelance worker, what have you, and you're employed. And I know I've heard this for a long time. People have asked me for a long time pre-pandemic, it's like, how can I just get out of corporate life? And now it seems like there's an exodus. But you need to slow down just a little bit. If you're feeling that your current situation is just terrible, slow down a little bit and don't jump ship lightly. You need to take it all in, because you could have a mindset shift to say the current person I'm working for is my first client, right? Thinking that, okay, what can I do to keep that client? So there's a mindset shift. Then you look for other clients, because when you're on your own, it's not that you're looking for all of these jobs. It's the mindset is different. You can still provide a great deal of value, still have a paycheck coming in, right? Because going from a paycheck to nothing, that's a hard thing to contend with. You won't find all the clients all at once and replace that income without finding another job, right? So if you truly want to go into business for yourself, treat that current employer as your first client. And what value can you bring to make things better for them? And who knows what kind of conversations can come of that. Then over time, if you get other clients, then you may choose to let that client go. So that's from the perspective of if you want to move from corporate world to doing your own thing. As far as conversation starters in the perspective with the hat, if you're working full time and want to go to part time, do you have any suggestions, Linda, if someone wants to change their work schedule but seem to have a unresponsive manager? Do you have any tips?
I think the very first thing is really take a step back and really think through, if you want to be staying with the same company, where are you providing the most value and enjoying it the most? And really outline that. And it takes a little bit of time. One of the things I often tell people to do is think about the days that you've come home in a really good mood. What were you doing? Now, could you do that every day? Because sometimes, like, I enjoy conversations like this, but if you said, okay, Linda, you're going to be on Zoom and having conversations like this 6 hours a day, I'd be like, and I'm going to scream. That doesn't, I can't do it. But I love, I'm very energized after a conversation like this. So start there. And to your point, you talked about it earlier, is create a proposal that actually talks about the benefits to the company with what you're proposing, even with suggestions of how they're going to fill the gaps. How would you, if you were in their shoes, fill the gaps? Because I think sometimes, especially with companies that are on the smaller side, we've just talked about the fact people are feeling short-staffed. Your managers and leaders are feeling the same type of pressure there, right? And they're wondering, how are they going to deliver what they've promised? How are they going to do it? And now you're telling me you want fewer hours. So, hey, I've thought about, this is my role currently. This is what I'd like it to be with this type of hours. Here's some suggestions of how I think that this is going to benefit the company long term, and how you can fill some of those gaps, and outline it for them. Do some of that thinking. They don't have to take that part, but it becomes much more of a win-win for the company, that you didn't just come in saying, I only want to work 20 hours a week and I'm going to do X. What do you mean you don't want me to do that? Well, think about it. Like, if I just recorded that, you'd be like, there's a reason, because you didn't tell, you, Dale, or you, Genesis, didn't hear how that's going to benefit the company, how it's going to structure. I mean, you can even go into what we were talking about with the communication. Do you want to be in the office? Do you want to be at home? Really think it through. And it's a pitch. You're really pitching a plan to them. And if you do it well, it's such a great thing, especially if you're talking about a manager or a company that this is new for, right? So Some of them have said, I don't have part-time because I don't know how to structure it. I don't know how hard. So answer the questions for them. And the other thing, don't blindside them. Set up a meeting. Ask for an hour of their time. Say, hey, I really would love to talk about my role at the company. Can we set a time? I'm going to need at least a half an hour or whatever it is. And let the person know what's going on, right? Instead of, hey, Genesis, we're walking down the hall. Do you have 20 minutes? And you're going, maybe, I guess. Okay. Now they're not in the right frame of mind to receive it. So you kind of have to set up the whole scenario to help them receive it. And the final advice is don't ask for an answer then. Allow them to process the information and ask, when could you follow up with them again about it? Usually give them a couple of days, if not a week, to, again, if this is new to them, let them take that in. Because I think sometimes what happens is the person isn't necessarily always as resistant as someone else thinks, but on the spot they are. If they're not good with change, if they can't figure out how it's going to work, they need some time to process it. And, you guys talked about being parents. Well, if you're going to make me give a decision now, the answer is going to be no, right? How many times did you say that to your kids? If you let me think about it, it might not have been. And the same thing is with the boss. I think you need to give them time to think about things and come back and say, can we continue this when can we continue this conversation? And it's a conversation, it's a dialogue. It's not an ultimatum.
Oh, that is great advice. Now I'm going to switch over to you, Genesis. Advice for leaders on having a group to, you've got to get a job done and just feeling kind of helpless of what to do. Do you have any advice for leaders?
Yeah, I think, again, it really goes back to what Linda was saying with communication. A lot of times for leaders, they are used to looking at P&L sheets. They're used to looking at budgets. They're used to looking at their numbers. They're used to looking at that production and saying, okay, we've got to produce. We need results. They're very used to that kind of mentality. And the biggest advice that I could give them is to make sure that they are looking at their people as one of those measurables. Meaning, like we talked about earlier, there's a hard cost associated with employee retention or employee resignation, however you want to look at it, right? There's a hard cost involved to replacing that employee. And if they are not taking that into account and all they're doing is looking at the data in front of them that does not include, it's only the results, it's only the measurables, it's only the deliverables to their clients right then, right there, and it's not looking at some of those other costs, then they're not going to be intentional about their calendar. They're not going to be intentional about the time that it takes. And I would absolutely say none of this happens without being intentional. Whether you are on the employee side and looking to make a pitch or for something that is different or looking to be heard in a different way or to have something different offered to you or create something new, or if you are on that leadership side of things that you have direct reports, or maybe you are in that C-suite level and you are responsible for navigating for the entire company, you've got lots of responsibility on your shoulders. But if you are not intentional about being for your team, here's the great thing. When leaders can be for their people and put their people first. I know a lot of times people will say, oh, the customer is always right. And as a customer, I appreciate that. Just saying, I do like to be right when I'm the customer. However, there's a direct correlation between how employees are being treated and how they treat their customers. I can tell, even if I am showing up at my favorite coffee shop or a fast food restaurant or something like that, I can tell what kind of day the person on the other side of me is having. And I can tell what that company culture looks like. Because even if they're having a bad day, if their company culture is fostering that open communication and that they know they're going to get their needs met and that their boss sees them and that they care about them, they feel known, they feel heard, they feel valued, even on a bad day, that's going to translate to me as a customer. However, if the boss is kind of cracking the whip because they've got production numbers to hit and they are feeling that pressure, whether from the marketplace or from a board or from people above them, if they're feeling that pressure and they're just pushing it downhill, that's typically what happens, right? I get pressure, I'm going to push it down on them. We just need to produce more. We have to do this better. If we get caught up in that space, then what happens is that translates out to the customer as well. And again, it affects your bottom line. It affects your ROI. It affects every single thing that you are doing in your business. This concept of communicating and caring for your employees is not just some, well, yeah, if I have time for it. It can't be that in this day and age. There was a time where people were clamoring for jobs and they would take anything and they would take any kind of treatment, if you will. They're like, fine, whatever. I know I just have to put up with this so I can put food on the table and have some kind of a job. Guess what? We are not in that world right now. And we probably shouldn't be anyway, but we're not in that world. We have a labor shortage. And if you have any designs on hanging on to your team, you've got to show them that they are valuable and that you are for them, that you hear them, and that it is a collaborative process to figure out how to make it a win-win situation for the organization and for all of the employees that are there.
Well, thanks for being here. I do hope that this has helped you gain different perspectives of what we're seeing with this great resignation phenomena. It's affecting all of us. We're seeing it even if we're an employee, an employer, and even as a consumer. We're seeing it. We're feeling it. I'm so glad that Genesis, Linda, and I decided, hey, let's hit record on our conversation because all these perspectives were too great to keep to ourselves because I wanted to share this with you. Genesis and Linda had so many great ideas and insight. I know I'm talking selfishly, but man, that really helped me. It has helped me, and I hope that me sharing their perspectives and my insight, so a perspective from three ways, from the employer, the company standpoint, and what they're seeing in their workforce, from a part-time perspective, and from the entrepreneurial small business perspective, or somebody transitioning from a traditional job to maybe a work from anywhere type job. And as I was listening to the playback and preparing this show, I realized that, man, Genesis and Linda both have some fantastic resources that have to do with communication, because that's where it stems from. We're trying to figure this out, and we can figure this out together, whether we're having a conversation with our current employer, whether we're having a conversation with clients and trying to gain new clients, whether we have employees and we need to have a conversation on what our needs are, and just figuring all this out. Learning to listen and to communicate effectively is so key. And both Genesis and Linda have fantastic resources when it comes to communication. Building communication skills, especially now when our relationship accounts have been depleted so much, is super important. Now, in the show notes, I provided all the links to the resources that Genesis and Linda both have. TAP has a great building communication mini course, and Genesis has some free downloads and even offers individualized team workshops to build communication between team members within the organization. So all of those links are in the show notes. Now, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe, because next week, Frank Spivak joins me to share some of his entrepreneurial story. And before running his own business, Frank worked as Chief Marketing and Sales Officer of a successful multi-million-dollar technology company in Minnesota. I think you're going to enjoy meeting him, so be sure to come in next week. Well, thanks for listening, and until next time, have a fantastic week.